Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham and Crystal Graham are going to talk some news with you here on this Monday. And because, Crystal, it is so gloomy outside for most, especially those who live in the Mid-Atlantic who are tuning in, especially those watching, we got to start with the weather. Here we are in our part of Virginia, the Shenandoah Valley, Central Virginia area, and we are under a flood watch. You are our intrepid weather reporter on the AFP staff. What are we expecting here the next few days in terms of rain?
Well, it looks like the Shenandoah Valley and particularly areas around the mountains are going to get the brunt of whatever rain does come our way. Right now, it's predicting anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of rain, but locally higher amounts possible. And again, that's where the Shenandoah Valley kind of comes into play. I talked this morning with AccuWeather's senior meteorologist Tom Kynes about the weather that's coming our way, and he said it's basically just a very slow moving storm that's over the Gulf Coast states and it's inching its way to Virginia. Now, most of the impact of this is going to come in probably around 8 p.m. this evening, and the effects of it will last about 24 hours. Now, rain is possible, of course, through Friday. While some of those days will have less rain, thunderstorms, things of that nature are also possible. But it looks like the heavy rain, for the most part, will happen over 24-hour period beginning around 8 p.m. this evening.
You said Gulf Coast states. You mean the Gulf of Mexico?
No comment, Chris Graham.
Oh, no comment. Come on. It's the Gulf of Mexico.
Of
All right.
course it is.
So
But anyway, I think that's the way maybe they get away with not taking an editorial opinion on that. They just said the Gulf Coast states.
oh, yeah, okay. Well, that's fair. The Gulf of something is fueling this storm. So yeah, it's slow moving. That's why, and here in our part of Virginia, the storms like this can get caught in the mountains. So, and
Mhm.
for whatever reason, our good luck is that the western side of the mountains tend to get the worst of that. Now, people who've lived in this area for 100 years will say the Hurricane Camille remnants in 1969, which is 3 years before I was born, and I'm 52 years old. It rained in Nelson County on the other side of us from the Central
Yeah.
Virginia side of the Blue Ridge, 30 inches in a day. But
Well,
generally,
and
on
we
our
we
side.
should mention too, yeah, that's insane, and of course that caused all kinds of flooding here in Waynesboro too, right? So,
Not
but
quite
the
what Nelson had, but yeah, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And the thing about that is, the streams and the things like that that fill up eventually all end up in the South River, which is sometimes what leads to that river flooding in Waynesboro. And of course, we've had flash flooding in downtown Stanton not too many years ago either. And of course, with the amount of rain that's going to be coming down, that's always a concern. I know Stanton has put some measures in place to kind of be able to watch that a little bit better than perhaps other times. But definitely there's a chance of some pretty severe weather. The other thing is, of course, that we're technically in a drought watch. So some rain can be beneficial. It's just whether or not we cross that line into something that's, damaging. Damaging to crops, right now is about the time that farmers are planting their fields, damaging to flowers, to people who have home gardens, not to mention property and things of that nature as well.
The last time I was in downtown Stanton, it was a few weeks ago. I was there to swear out a warrant against a guy who was trying to threaten people going to a political protest. You don't really think about downtown Stanton being on water. Like downtown Waynesboro's got a river running through it. South River
Mhm.
runs through downtown Waynesboro, but Lewis Creek runs under downtown Stanton. And downtown Stanton's on a hill, and the water kind of goes down. But there are parts of downtown Stanton you can walk through. And when you're walking to the police department to swear out a warrant against a guy trying to threaten people at a political protest, you kind of walk over parts. You can see the stream going under the downtown there. So that's where it flooded a few years ago. A really, really, really bad thunderstorm just at one I think it was a Friday night, like in 2021, 2022. Few inches of rain, and there it was. And yeah, the city is now spending millions to try to deal with that. But I don't think we'll quite get a few inches in a few hours like that situation, but we will probably get a few inches over the next few days. I know you would ask me when we were having our editorial meeting, should you contact the local flood watchers to see if they're, Gary Kreitzer here in Waynesboro, for example, to see what they're looking at, and we may have to do that this week. So we could go from drought watch to flood. Just
Yeah, absolutely. We'll just have to keep an eye on it over the next, like I said, probably 36, 48 hours is where we're looking at the most of the rain coming down. So.
Okay, so keeping with the local theme, local hour here on our podcast, you said there were a couple of issues on the city council agenda in Waynesboro that you'll be paying attention to this week. What are they?
Yeah, just a couple of things. One has to do with the Metalcrafters building. A lot of people know that the Virginia Metalcrafters building, more on the east side of town, is now the home to Basic City Brewery, Commonwealth Crush, Hap Coffee, the Foundry, a music venue with 800 plus people there. It looks like they're going to be getting some kind of or applying for some kind of an industrial revitalization fund loan related to that building. And specifically, I don't know all the details as to what it would go for. It's something where basically, different projects applied for this, and the city is going to submit this grant through the Economic Development Authority. And of course, it's been like a decade-long project revitalizing the Virginia Metal Crafters building, and it started with the same kind of a grant. And obviously, they're continuing to make investments in the building and that kind of thing. So this is basically low interest financing to kind of close the gap and help be able to utilize the space up to 100%, which right now there's still a lot of vacant spaces kind of within that. So that is on the city council agenda. Also, Chris, and you may know more about this than I do, but it looks like that there is a meals tax that's being looked at. And I don't know specifically if Waynesboro has a meals tax now. That's something that I do have a question about. So I don't know the answer to that, but it looks like that they are putting forth a ordinance, putting a tax in place of, looks like 7.5%, and that will go into effect July 1st of this year, assuming that is passed and goes through. So I will have to look into that a little bit more. Like I said, I'm not 100% sure of what it might be now. Those are two things that I'm paying attention to. Of course, the budget is still there. There's a couple of public hearings and things of that nature taking place this evening as well. Hopefully, they don't all have to drive in drenching downpours this evening. But as of now, the meeting is going on as planned.
This is the example of news organizations across the country scaling back their operations, especially at the local level. Whatever the Nationals do, who cares? I mean, they're not really covering much anyway. They just get people yelling at each other all the time. But it's important that wherever you're watching this from, that you have a local news outlet of some sort, newspaper, website, or something that is keeping tabs on your local city council, your local county commission or county board of supervisors or whatever the case, just to make sure they're not screwing around with your money. So,
Yeah, well, hey, and I just Googled real quick the Waynesboro. I should have done this ahead of time, but the meals tax now is currently 7%. So it looks like they're looking to increase that to 7.5%. In addition to, there's currently a 6% local lodging tax, and then of course your state sales tax of 5.3%. So but if you can go out, if you're going out to eat, then the theory there is that you can afford it and you can pay these extra taxes that help these cities, grow and pay their
question.
police and all that stuff.
Since it sounds like you have the document open there, what is this? What would this extra 0.5% on the meals tax? What's it expected to generate if that's available there for
Yeah,
you?
it doesn't actually break that down, so that's something I'll have to look into. This is, in fact, the document is very brief. It's just the levy of the tax taking effect July 1st. It's just basically the
Right.
part of the ordinance. So again, I'll have to ask some questions of City Manager Mike Camp on that, and I'll update our readers soon.
It'll just be a indication of how much people eat out in Waynesboro, not just locals like us, but all the people who drive through on our beautiful interstate out there, right? So
And oh
just
man, are there a lot of restaurants to choose from in Waynesboro? There's no question about that.
we live right there at the nexus of all that stuff going on. So hey,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Chris, I wanted to ask you about something as well, more on the sports side. You just before we came on to do this podcast, you had filed a story related to UVA basketball and a new hire that they have on their staff.
yeah, this is a story that'll get half the people who read AFP hating me, and probably even more than half because there are going to be people who read this story and say, I don't want to think about politics with my sports. But um, Yeah, and I knew this a week or two ago. A guy's name is Michael Crowder. He's been added to the staff as the director of cultural engagement and cultural something in alumni engagement, right? So a director of culture, let's just say. And he comes from. So I knew about this a week or so ago because I was reporting in the context of writing about whatever offers were or were not made to Kyle Guy and Isaiah Wilkins, two former UVA players, UVA assistant coaches, who were not retained by the new coach Ryan Odom. And so, in the context of that, this Michael Crowder guy's name comes up. I see his position listed as director of culture and alumni engagement. Didn't really think too much about it. But I wrote, so his name had already appeared in AFP. Today, we get a press release from UVA Athletics. One of those simple things. Hey, new staff hire, director of culture and alumni engagement. And person putting press release together. They did their due diligence. They put his bio in there, and the guy's a UVA alum. Michael Crowder is a 2014 UVA alum, so he's a UVA guy. And
Mhm.
he had worked under Griff Aldrich, who is the former Longwood basketball coach, who is now, at least for now, the associate head coach on the staff of Ryan Odom. I wrote last week about how Aldrich may end up being the general manager for the UVA basketball program. That's word from Odom himself
Mhm.
on a podcast last week. So this Michael Crowder guy worked under Griff Aldrich as his director of culture. The press release tells us that this Michael Crowder guy had come to Longwood from working with a group called Young Life. And
Mhm.
the release didn't say anything about Young Life, just that he'd worked with them and now he's director of culture at UVA basketball. So, okay.
Mhm.
So, I mean, you got to do your job as a reporter and you look up what's Young Life. It sounds like it's some sort of youth-based something. Turns out it's a youth-based ministry that's a nonprofit based out in Colorado Springs, Colorado, founded in either 1933 or 1941, depending on who you believe. And it has affiliates in all 50 states, and it reaches out to middle school, high school, and college age students to try to bring them to Christ. And that seems pretty simple and straightforward. And then you look into it a little bit, and Youth Life also has it's an event. It's evangelical. It's very conservative based evangelical. That's not my problem. I didn't bring this into it. UVA Athletics brought it into it by hiring the guy. Youth Life also has had some issues
Is it
with
Young Life or Youth Life?
Youth Life. Youth Life.
Okay.
It has had issues in the recent past with controversies involving its policies towards LGBTQ students. Essentially, the organization will allow LGBTQ students to join, but they can't formally, not join. They can take part in activities, but can't volunteer with the group, can't have leadership positions in the group. That's their choice, but that's who they are. They also, and they call homosexuality a lifestyle choice. So that tells you a little bit about their thinking.
Mhm.
Um, there was a story that really made a lot of news a few years ago with this group um, that uh, involved a volunteer in the state of Washington that was for a volunteer who was a leader locally in the state of Washington in the Seattle area, who was told to um, no longer be a leader in the group because she had posted something on her Facebook page about a friend's 17-year-old son who had just come out as gay, supporting him.
Mhm.
She was told either remove that post or you can't be a volunteer here anymore. So, I mean, it's something, right? So, and
Mhm.
then also they have faced, allegations and actually entered into a settlement over a string of sexual harassment cases involving people that apparently were covered up by leaders in the group. They have faced investigations by the EEOC regarding racial discrimination. So, okay, all that said, that doesn't mean that this Michael Crowder guy has any of these thoughts or beliefs or anything else. But he comes from the group. He's worked with the group since 2016. He's now the director of culture for UVA basketball. That's worthy of mention as far as I'm concerned.
It is. I mean, I feel like UVA has always had a strong emphasis on religion. I mean, at least
No,
with Coach Bennett, the five pillar.
well, The five pillars, but I don't know. I wouldn't say evangelical MAGA religion.
Right. No, no, no. Yeah. But I just meant to say that, it seems that that has been a focus. And so it will be interested to see.
Faith versus religion, let's say. The five pillars were there's a faith base to that, but you can also follow those five pillars and not be religious.
Right.
And you certainly don't have to be MAGA religious. I mean, anti-LGBTQ, let's sweep sexual harassment under the rug. Let's institutionalize racial discrimination in our group. You know, I don't want to hate. I don't want to hate on this guy. He could be. It could be that he doesn't hold any of these beliefs either. But man, oh man, he's worked with the group for 9 years, and
Mhm.
now he's now. I mean, I think people need to know this. I mean, in this, and UVA itself bragged about it. They put it in the press release. They said this guy's. You corrected me. You said it's young life. So that's in a private message here on the thing. Um, it's people have a right to know this. And if UVA athletics wants to brag about the guy coming from this background, I think you need to know the other side of that as well.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of Young Life before, and I do think that there are some active chapters in this area as well. But of course, this is a very red area, and so that could be part of it. What do you think that his job really is? I mean, what is a director of culture? How is that a full-time job?
I mean, I can understand why they had to add the alumni engagement part to it to maybe
Mhm.
feel like that's something to make the job a full-time job. Culture. I mean, yeah, I mean, the description. There is a description in the story. I mean, I tried to quote from the story. I wanted to be fair, to UV Athletics. I mean, they wanted to brag on the guy. What did we say here? Coach Odom was quoted saying, "We're thrilled to add him to our staff." Director of Culture Formation. This sounds Orwellian, if you ask me.
Mhm.
Let's see. Uh, he connected with Longwoods men basketball in 2020. This is according to the press release, and spent time as a character coach over the next 3 years, providing mentorship and guidance for players and coaches to help balance athletics, academics, and personal matters. In that capacity, he helped the coaching staff integrate character building initiatives into the basketball program. Okay, I mean, character building sounds great, great. But the guy comes from a background where the character building is focused on. I mean, this group has faced racial
Mhm.
discrimination as charges that and had to deal with them from the EEOC. They don't embrace not only LGBTQ, but that you can't even say things supporting LGBTQ.
I think of things like, we're fans of the show Ted Lasso, for example, and how they brought in like a sports psychologist. And so, this seems to be something that's kind of edging along the same line, as
Sports
that.
psychologists, though, would be benign. I mean, in a sense, because yeah, because that was a whole story arc in that show. You're right,
Mhm.
where you're trying to a sports psychologist helping you through issues with balancing, being a full-time college student and being a
Mhm.
full-time college athlete. Also, throw in now that a lot of these guys certainly are making money through the NIL process.
Mhm.
Making sure you don't blow that money. Don't making sure you don't fall temptation to what we've seen with some college programs where because of the prevalence of sports gambling now, hey, don't do that kind of thing either, and that, but that's not the character building isn't lifestyle,
Mhm.
or life choices. Make good life choices. Make sure you spend enough time studying, make sure you spend enough time on basketball, make sure you don't blow all your money versus character. I mean, this I don't know. It seems an odd mix to me to hire a guy to be part of a college basketball. Let's just be blunt. The sport of basketball is a very African American sport. This
Mhm.
guy comes from a back. I'm not saying this guy's a racist, but he comes from a group that has issues with race. Um, it's an interesting hire, if you ask me.
So, on a different note, Chris, we spent the weekend watching 3 baseball games at UVA, and the team swept the University of Miami, which was a little bit of a surprise. I'm just curious about your thoughts about UVA baseball and if they have a shot at the College World Series again. I know it was a slow start for them this season.
Yeah, very slow start. This team was preseason number two in one poll, top five consensus in the national polls. After coming off of two straight College World Series appearances, the last year's team, so much of last year's everyday lineup coming back. Jay Woolfolk, the number one starter from last year, coming back. So there were high expectations going into the season, and then yes, a very slow start to a point where, as of maybe April 10th to 15th, this team did not look like it would even make the NCAA tournament. Now with this streak, I mean, not only the sweep of Miami at home, but 2 weekends ago, before the exam break, sweeping Georgia Tech on the road, a Georgia Tech team ranked in the top 20, still ranked in the top 20 after UVA swept Georgia Tech. So 6 straight wins in ACC play. This team is definitely playing its best baseball right now. Um, it still has a hurdle. Virginia Tech down in Blacksburg. Virginia Tech is coming on a 6-game ACC losing streak. But if Virginia Tech, I mean, they're still I still say they're on the fringe of the mix of NCAA tournament consideration. If they can sweep Virginia, they can play themselves back into better consideration for the NCAA tournament. So, you're going to get the best shot from Virginia Tech down in Blacksburg Thursday, Friday, Saturday. UVA needs to probably win two of those three to really solidify what I think is an NCAA tournament resume. I couldn't have believed 3 months ago that I'd be saying, yeah, they need to win two or three at Virginia Tech to get in the NCAA tournament, but they probably need to do that. Um, so there's still work to be done, but I mean, it was that UVA team, Crystal, that you and I saw Friday, Saturday, Sunday, beating a really good Miami team. That was good baseball. I mean, Miami played well, Virginia just played better, and that was good for UVA fans. That was good to see.
Yeah, I think all three games in the series were competitive. It was interesting. UVA obviously has a very deep pitching bench because there were a lot of pitchers put in between the three games as well. I know they have another game planned for Tuesday night, but of course, with that rain that we talked about earlier in the forecast, have you heard anything about whether that game's going to be played?
There's been no official word. We're talking right before 5 o'clock on Monday here I was looking at the clock on the computer. Nothing that I have seen official about that, I guess. I mean, it makes sense. Let's wait for the weather to come through. UVA baseball is past exams. George Mason baseball, that's the opponent. They're past exams. I mean, both of these, I mean, if there's any break in the weather, both of these teams want to play this game. George Mason is a top 100 RPI team. They're 98th. They're 35 and 17 overall, 19 and 8 in the A10. They'd love to come to Virginia and get a win. They're not going to get an at-large bid with a 98 RPI, but they'd love to come and play Virginia and get a win late in the season. And Virginia would love to, a win over George Mason would, be a feather in the cap for UVA's postseason chances too. So I'd be surprised if we hear today any word about that. If they could do anything to get that game in, they're going to try to, and especially with the flexibility of school actually being out of session now, exams are over. They don't have to, but they're not going to play this game on Wednesday. The weather lightens up. It looks like the forecast lightens up Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening. They're not going to do that just for simply the fact that I don't know George Mason's schedule for the weekend. I know Virginia's schedule for the weekend. Virginia goes to Blacksburg on Thursday. Brian O'Connor is not going to want to play a game on Wednesday and then go down to Blacksburg on Thursday. He's going to want to get down there on Wednesday to be able to get ready for Virginia Tech. So if this game's not played tomorrow, it's not going to be played. Yeah, they're going to do the best they can to sneak this one in. And by the way, for our listeners out there, viewers out there, okay, I gotta say, the dog you're hearing barking, his name is if you're a UVA sports fan, his name is Kihei. Kihei has something to say.
He does. Well, I don't know if it's Kihei or Reese. We're actually puppy sitting another dog for one of our neighbors.
It's not Griff, so it's not the other UVA dog in the house.
The three dogs that way. But anyway, I do hear, I did put him in another room, but he does have something to say. So he must want to weigh in some capacity on what we're talking here about UVA sports. But yeah, so Chris, what else are you working on this week? What else do you have on your agenda?
Oh, it's daily, minute by minute. It seems like trying to keep up with the Trump administration. We had a piece today on the site that people might want to look at, just telling you about the failures of DOGE. Not surprisingly, the failures of DOGE to achieve any real cost savings. In fact, in February and March, the receipts of the federal government actually increased. $85 billion in spending each of those 2 months. That was way above what the Biden administration spent last year. So for all the talk about cuts in DOGE, that brought about by DOGE, it's not working. So we break that down. We're trying to break that down for you. We also had a story over the weekend about the $400 million gift from the government of Qatar, the royal family of Qatar. Gracious gift, man. I tell you what, giving a $400 million plane to Donald Trump that he will then be able to use it in his personal life after his presidency is over. And The government of Qatar, of course, is one of the main funders of Hamas, which we supposedly don't like. But and his Department of Justice, headed by Pam Bondi, wrote a memo, basically giving the Trump administration an out on this, saying that there's no violation of any federal ethics laws here. Pam Bondi, by the way, before getting her job as Attorney General heading up the DOJ, she worked as an agent for the government of Qatar. So, pointing out these things is an important part of our job, and we're going to try to do that as best we can. At least, at least let folks know what's being done in their name by their government.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine if Biden or Obama had taken a plane from Qatar? What the outrage would be? And it seems that while there's like a little bubble of outrage, that there's just not what you'd expect.
The MAGA went crazy because Obama once wore a tan suit. And he didn't take a $400 million plane from people who fund our enemies. Yeah, it's the hypocrisy is astounding, but it is what it is. And that's why we do. I have to ask you, Crystal, real quick. What are you working on? I know you have You mentioned of course, the weather. We'll be monitoring the weather for our local readers, the situation, the government situation in Waynesboro. You, of course, do a great job keeping up with developments in the health, particularly mental health beats. The Trump administration has been, unfortunately, tearing down so much of what both Obama years ago, the Biden administration in recent years had done to build up our support for mental health. So what are you working on the next few days that might, be of interest to our listeners out there?
Well, since you're talking about mental health, one of the stories that I am working on is, you all may recall that in February there was a shooting in Crozet that took the lives of 3 people, including the shooter. The shooting afterwards, there was a lot of talk about the mental health of the shooter, the fact that he had been dealing with paranoia, possibly schizophrenia. And I actually had the opportunity to talk with a an Albemarle County official who kind of oversees what they call as HEART, which is their mental health kind of response. It's not just mental health, it's any kind of behavioral health, but they have basically people that respond. And joining that person with me during the interview was actually the fire chief as well as the police chief in Albemarle County. And they talked a little bit about how that's working. And it's not 24/7, 100% up and running now, but it has made some big impact in the region. And so I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit more about the HEART program and how that's benefiting people who do live in Albemarle County, and how they're actually hoping that what they're doing could be kind of almost like, something that other cities could adopt. They could talk to them and do it. So it's been something that's been a few years in the making, so to speak. And hiring someone at the Albemarle County level to kind of oversee it was kind of the final step in what they were trying to put together there. And you can look at any police department right now and see that they're trying to do the same kind of thing. There's some laws that are in place right now that in a way, law enforcement is kind of under some deadlines to have that kind of mental health, behavioral health response. And so there's been a push. We did a story about Harrisonburg and how, they were hiring some mental health positions on their staff as well. And so I think we'll see more and more of that in the future. But I look forward to sharing that story. I'm also going to catch up with Waynesboro. They've been working on at their park, the park that they've kind of been doing there. They've been working on I want to think of the right word for it, a playground, a teaching ground of sorts for people who are learning the rules of the road, so to speak. And so they actually, it was a project of, I believe, the Rotary Club of Waynesboro, Augusta. They were they kind of helped fund this and help put it together. It's called a traffic garden, and it's where people can basically take their bikes. Pedestrians can learn from it as well, but they can learn a little bit about what it's like to actually be on the road, to prepare new riders for being out on the city streets, basically. And so there was I believe it was last Saturday, there was an opening for that. And so I'm going to catch up with the Waynesboro Office on Youth to talk a little bit more about that project and how they see the city and the residents kind of utilizing that space in the future.
Oh, that's nice. You know, Constitution Park in Waynesboro is going to be something as the next few years develops, it's going to be really a gem for Waynesboro. Right there near the former DuPont plant that, made money for us for a long time, has been an eyesore for now a long time as well. Now, in addition to being an eyesore, polluting a lot of the valley and up
Mhm.
up through the top, the top of the valley, all the way up to the Potomac River. But yeah, turning it into a benefit instead of a
Yeah,
negative.
absolutely. And I'll just mention too, because not this past weekend, but the weekend before, we went to see Everclear at the Foundry, and so two other stories that kind of spurred out of that is the opening act, 14 Pounds, was a great local Stanton-based band, and so I want to talk to them a little bit about the opportunity to open up for Everclear, and also it sounds like they've been on tour as well, so I want to learn a little bit more about that, and then also I want to catch up with the Foundry's owner, Bart Landman. I want to talk to him a little bit too. I talked to him the night of the show, and that was the first show that sold out ahead of time. So it wasn't the first show that sold out, but I think he said this one sold out in like 15 days. And so while he was a little hesitant at first to put it on the calendar because there's a big price tag associated with bringing in Everclear, I think what he told me is that he'd like to do some more acts like that in the future. So it could be interesting to see if we get some more 90s bands, making their way to Waynesboro as well. So I hope to catch up with him as well.
In general, some name bands coming to Waynesboro. That'd be really neat. Yeah, we were there for that show. It was a fun show. There were a lot of people there. Like, can you believe Everclear's here in Waynesboro? And so they did a great job. They were doing great business that night, and yeah, it should be fun. So I look forward to those stories coming up from Crystal for AFP. Well, for those who are watching, those who are listening, please feel free to drop us a line. Me at Chris at AugustaFreePress.com, Crystal at AugustaFreePress.com. If you have news tips, story ideas, things you want us to look into, we'll be glad to do so. So for Crystal Graham, I'll sign off. Chris Graham, thanks for listening, and please read AugustaFreePress.com.